what actually happens to your retirement when your wealth starts growing, because there's something no one really explains. Hitting 100,000, 300,000, 500,000, or even 1 million doesn't improve your retirement the way you think it will. In fact, each level of wealth creates a completely different kind of retirement. And if you don't understand that, you can spend years stacking money thinking you're getting closer to freedom, when in reality, you're building the wrong kind of retirement. Now, let me show you why. Two people can have the exact same goal to stop working as soon as possible. But depending on the level they reach, one will feel relief. The other will feel insecure. And the difference isn't the number. It's what that number starts demanding from you. Because here's the part almost nobody notices. Retirement isn't a destination. It's a system. And that system changes completely at every level of wealth. Today, you're going to understand exactly that. How retirement works at lower levels, where it starts to feel like freedom, but still isn't. And the point where money finally starts taking control, and most importantly, why most people get all of this wrong and end up delaying their own retirement without even realizing it. Because once you understand these transitions, you stop focusing only on accumulating money and start making decisions that actually speed things up. Let's start with the level where almost everyone thinks this should already be enough. Somewhere between 100,000 and 250,000 invested. Because this is where most people for the first time feel like they're close. You look at the number and think, okay, now things are finally moving. But in reality, something else is happening here. Let me show you with a simple example. Imagine two people who reach this level, same age, same income, same goal. Retire as soon as possible. The first person looks at that number and thinks, if I keep this up, I'll get there in a few years. They stay consistent, keep investing, stick to the plan. Now the second person looks at the exact same number and starts changing their behavior. They begin testing new strategies, trying to speed up returns, tweaking their portfolio more often. Because in their mind, now it makes sense to optimize. And this is where the first invisible shift in retirement begins. At this level, retirement still does not depend on your money. It still depends on you. Your effort is still the main driver. If you stop investing, the whole system basically slows down with you. And that creates a dangerous illusion. You think you're close to freedom, but you're actually still tied to the process. Because at this stage, your money isn't sustaining anything yet. It's just keeping up. Now, look at how this plays out over time. The first person who stayed consistent keeps building a solid foundation. The second one, trying to speed things up, starts to become inconsistent. Not because they made bad decisions, but because at this level, small changes don't accelerate things, they disrupt them. And here's the part almost nobody sees. At this first level, retirement looks a lot more like accumulation disguised as progress. It feels like you've moved forward, but structurally, nothing has really changed yet. And that leads directly to the next stage. Because there comes a point when your money stops just keeping up and starts actually participating in the process. And when that happens, everything changes. Now we step into the level where most people feel like something has changed, but can't quite explain what. Somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 invested. And this is where the second transformation of retirement happens. But this time, it's more subtle. Let's go back to the same example. Both people keep moving forward. The first stayed consistent. The second one adjusted, experimented, tried to optimize. Now, they both reach this new level. And for the first time, the money starts generating a level of growth that's no longer small. Let's simplify it. If you have 300,000 invested at 7% a year, that's roughly $21,000 per year. Now, compare that to what a lot of people invest. $1,500 a month. In other words, what you've already built starts generating almost as much as you do. And this is where something important happens. You're no longer pulling the system on your own. Now there's another engine running alongside you. But this also creates a new kind of mistake. Because at this stage, people start to feel like they're almost free. And that's exactly when they start interfering more. They try to protect gains, try to optimize returns, try to avoid losses. But there's a structural problem here. When your money starts competing with you, any interference has a bigger impact. Before, your contributions dominated the outcome. Now, the portfolio's behavior starts to matter more, and that changes the game completely. Because small decisions that used to be irrelevant now start getting expensive. And this is where the second illusion of retirement is born. The feeling of control. You think you're becoming more sophisticated, when in reality, you're increasing the risk of messing up your own system. Meanwhile, the first person who stayed consistent starts to feel something different. Not freedom yet, but stability. Because now growth doesn't depend only on them. And that leads straight into the next stage. Because there comes a point when your money not only competes with you, it starts doing half the work. And when that happens, retirement stops being just a projection and starts becoming a real system. Now we're stepping into the level where most people feel for the first time that something has actually changed. Somewhere between 500,000 and 800,000 invested. And this is where the third transformation of retirement happens. But unlike the others, this one isn't just psychological. It's structural. Let's keep going with the same example. Both people reach this level. Now, if you have 600,000 invested at 7% a year, that's about $42,000 annually. Now compare that to how people typically behave at this stage. A lot of them can't contribute like they used to. Life changes. Expenses go up. Energy goes down. And little by little, your money starts producing the same or even more than what you're putting in. And this is where the most important shift so far happens. The system starts to sustain itself, not fully, but partially, and that changes the nature of retirement. Because for the first time, you can actually picture a scenario where stopping contributions doesn't break everything. But this also creates a new kind of risk. Because at this stage, people start to relax too early. They feel like they've made it. They loosen their discipline, increase their lifestyle, take on bigger commitments, without realizing the system isn't complete yet. It works, but it's still fragile. And this is where the third illusion of retirement is born. The false arrival, you're no longer at the beginning, but you're not done either. And any mistake here won't send you back to zero, but it can cost you years. Now look at the contrast. The first person who stayed consistent starts operating differently. They understand it's no longer about speeding things up. It's about protecting the system. They reduce interference, keep the structure intact, protect the process, and that allows the money to keep taking on more of the load. Meanwhile, the second person, still trying to tweak, improve, optimize, falls into a dangerous cycle. Because the bigger the portfolio, the bigger the impact of each decision. And this is where math starts to matter more than effort. And that leads directly into the next stage. Because there comes a point when your money stops doing half and starts doing most of the work. And when that happens, retirement changes form for the last time. Now we reach the level most people believe is the final goal. Somewhere around 1 million or more invested. And this is where the fourth and most important transformation of retirement happens. But not in the way people expect. Let's keep the same line of thinking. If you have 1 million invested at 7% a year, that's roughly $70,000 annually. Now compare that to how people typically behave once they get here. Most people are no longer focused on contributing. The focus shifts, preserving, organizing, deciding how to use it. Because for the first time, your money isn't just keeping up with you. It's not just competing with you. It's not just doing half the work. It's doing more than you. And that completely changes the nature of retirement. Because now you're no longer building the system. You're managing a system that already exists. And this is where the biggest shift of all happens. The responsibility moves. Before, the risk was not having enough. Now, the risk is making decisions that break what's already working. And that creates a kind of pressure almost nobody expects. Because despite how it sounds, the more money you have, the less room you have to mess up. Not because you'll lose everything, but because small decisions start to have much bigger consequences. A 1% mistake here isn't irrelevant anymore. It matters. And this is where retirement transforms for the last time. It stops being about getting there and becomes about not messing it up. And that completely changes the experience. Because a lot of people reach this level expecting total freedom, but find something different. Ongoing responsibility, constant decisions, strategic adjustments, emotional management. Meanwhile, the first person, the one who built everything with consistency, enters this stage with an invisible advantage. They don't need to reinvent anything. They already trust the system. They just maintain it. And that changes everything. Because while others feel pressure, they feel in control. And this is where the whole picture comes together. Because now you can finally see something that wasn't obvious in the beginning. Retirement was never about a number. It was always about the kind of system that number creates. So let me show you what actually happened here. At the beginning, the question seemed simple. How much do I need to retire? But now you can see that was never the right question. Because there isn't a single number that solves retirement. What exists are different versions of it. At lower levels, retirement still depends entirely on you. In the middle, it starts sharing the workload with you. Further ahead, it begins to run on its own, but it's still sensitive. And at the highest level, it turns into something almost nobody expects. A system that needs to be carefully maintained. And this is exactly where most people get lost. Because they spend years focused on hitting a number without understanding what that number turns into. They imagine freedom, but find responsibility. They imagine rest, but find decisions. They imagine an ending, but find a whole new kind of game. And that changes everything. Because once you really understand this, you stop chasing a specific number and start building the right kind of structure. You start thinking about where you are today, what actually changes at the next level, and what kind of retirement you want to build. Because two people can have the exact same amount of money and live completely different retirement. Not because of the money itself, but because of how that money was structured. So in the end, retirement isn't about how much you have. It's about what your money is capable of doing without you. And the question that really matters stops being, how much do I need to stop? And becomes, what kind of system am I building? Because that's what, in the end, determines whether retirement feels light or heavy.